Kayla Collard, who has been a supporter, a friend, but also somebody that I have looked up to in terms of how she champions youth and youth access, as well as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We are incredibly grateful to Kayla and for all of the work that she's done. Kayla, would you be willing to share a little bit about UNSDSN and the SDG Academy?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chelsea. Hi, everybody. Nice to see all of you. Had a great conversation so far already. Like Chelsea said, I was with the UNSDSN, which is the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and I work at the SDG Academy, which is the educational department of the SDSN. What does that mean, right? So I work in the higher education and the lifelong learning. We have educational resources that are public good. So I will encourage, I can share it with you to share with everybody. One important thing, and going back to technology at the core of this discussion, is we launched a partnership with UNESCO just a couple weeks ago for open educational resources. So what we're trying to try to do is create a platform where all these resources from public libraries, papers by politicians, papers by doctors, where there's not a paywall to access those. So something that we're really looking forward to do. We need all of you to support us and to help us. So if you'd like to talk about that, would love to talk more about it. Obviously that goes back to Lavatory and the AI conversation, which are super new coming out of the UN this year. Super exciting. But yeah, can't wait to talk to more of you and learn more about the work that you're doing in sustainable development, technology, and AI.
Thank you, Kayla. Okay, we have a few more. So the second partnership that we're very excited to work on and apply technology focused on United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 5 and gender equality for women and girls has to do, yet again, Barbara, with choice. So we're very excited to have Christine, who is the executive director of Could You. Many people don't know this, and when she shared this, it rocked me at my core that several women and girls across the world are having transactional sex for period pads and tampons. She started Could You and has done a lot of work in terms of legislation and fundraising, and actually even produces the cup itself to ensure that women and girls have a choice with their bodies and what happens in terms of menstrual equity. So with that, Christine, would you share a little bit about Could You?
Thank you. And yeah, I love your mission. And so 500 million girls a month around the world, including America, are unable to afford products, and so it affects health. But I think the hardest part for me was when I learned that there's been a solution around 87 years. World's Leading Research is one of our advisors. It has been, for 38 years, she's been producing data showing, and not just her, tons of researchers. And so we are on a mission to make sure that it's included as choice, because one cup lasts 10 years. In the last 3 years, we've pivoted and seen 136,000 girls across the world, in Ukraine, in America, mostly in Africa, in refugee camps and prisons, in communities without water, and it works. And so I'm watching lives change, and so I feel like at least let the girl have a choice. And if she wants it, let her have it, and if not, then she can choose a pad that is disposable. So thank you. We're excited for the technology, especially for refugee camps. The education piece matters, and so we think that Lavatory is going to make it a lot easier for large communities who love it to scale. So thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Our third partnership, which we're very gracious to have Pedro, who literally got on a plane because the executive director is actually at a funeral for a family friend at the moment. So Unify has been an incredible partner. Brendan and Unify partnered with me when we actually ran the first ever global campaign during the pandemic for Next Gens across the world. Unify brings together different leaders from different backgrounds and different party lines to see how we can work together to make change. Pedro, can you share a little bit about Unify?
Yes, I will. So our name is kind of sums up who we are. So we spell Unify, Y-O-U. N-I-F-Y. So we are all about individual and community thriving. So if I ever make a commercial for it, I'm gonna say when you and I unify, then we'll solve the problems that are very easily solved. So Unify basically works in the area of minimizing toxic polarization and bridging divides of every kind. And we do that in many ways. Hopefully at some point we'll be having a wiki that will help contribute to the intelligence platform that you all have. And one thing, I used to be a pastor, so I had this tendency of like breaking down words and what they mean to kind of show the power behind what it is that we're trying to do. And I love that you all call your technology a decision engine, because the humans, that's what we're here for. We're here to make decisions. And this word decision, or it means to cut. And decision means to undo that rupture, undo that separation, undo that divide. And we can only do that by making decisions more effectively. So I'm very excited about what you all have created, how you're naming it, because that matters, and what it can contribute to the society by being able to bring together the intelligence of the globe and helping us make decisions faster and more equitably. So I'm glad that we're a part of it and looking forward to seeing what emerges.
Thank you. Okay, so those are some of our partners that we're really excited to have in this room tonight. Part of what we would like to do with Logic Tree and Chris's vision was imagine if you could have access to every single person in this room's brain. Some of you have developed careers, and I know I laugh at the word brain because it makes everyone feel weird. It makes me feel weird too. But if you could understand the knowledge that someone has spent their entire life building, or what they were most passionate about, and that was what was informing your decisions, how different would our daily lives be? So I will attempt, I don't think I can do everyone, but I'm gonna try from my brain to share just very rapid fire. We have two friends, Tim and Tan, that do this for World Logic Day, where they share what everyone is in the room and what they're focused on in less than like a minute. So I'm gonna try really hard, and then I will turn it over to Nisa and Sophia. So that I'm gonna do my best. So we heard from Pedro, and I'm only gonna do the people that we're partnered with, and if you're a spouse, please know I would love to get to know you better and understand what you're working on, or a partner that I haven't met yet. Green is with the fourth floor. She has an ambitious but amazing goal to get more women on boards. I can't even remember the statistics and how much that they've done already. They've been in Forbes, you name it, but she's championing not only having women at the table, but having women helping make the decisions alongside others. Barbara, I've mentioned a few times, we met briefly, but has been instrumental in Chris and I's journey of wrapping our heads around this concept of our mission and our vision and choice. She uses humor to diffuse trauma and brings people together from all over the world to better understand how to move past obstacles, but first starting with humor. Zach is Nisa's partner, who I don't know a whole lot about, but I've heard is brewing something with consulting, which could be very exciting, and I'm excited to learn more. Alex came here from Austin to support Chris and I. He's our head of growth and on our team. My favorite thing about Alex is not only his passion for technology, but his passion for sustainability and art, and how he looks at things with both a technical, analytical lens, but also an empathetic one. Denise is a part of a lot of different things, but one of which I'm still excited to learn about is 1640. She has a lot of work and has done a lot of work to figure out how to move capital towards good, and how to make sure capital is aligning with your ethos and your values. Obviously, you know Chris is the CEO of Logic Tree. If you have want to meet anyone on the planet that is more passionate about logic, I don't think there is anybody currently, but anything related to how we make decisions, how humans make decisions can make change, there's no one better that I know. Barry Johnson runs Be Do Win Capital. We've had the pleasure of working together on a few different initiatives, and they have a few different structures, but is very much looking to, and we are excited about, investing in underserved and minority fund managers, breaking the needle not only on underserved founders and diverse founders, but ensuring that they understand and have the resources to invest in capital. I mentioned my parents. I call them semi-retired. I think they travel now more than I do, which is saying something. But they remind me every day. I think, you know, Chris and I were just fortunate to be able to bring such incredible people together in this room, and we're often even a bit shocked at what all is going on, and they remind me every day that true partners in love can really win. Kayla, we heard from with UNSCSN and STG Academy. I know Nisa brought her friend who I think is focused on voting and voter action, which is really exciting. We heard from Christine former minister Gligor, who actually helped invent the internet. And he told me that he attends gatherings where the founders of the internet come together, the ones that are still alive, so I can't wait to hear more about that. Sandra, we met at UNGA, and I was just so inspired by the speech that she was doing for hundreds of kids, I believe, in Dubai around their possibilities and access to education. So that's the room you're in. Last but not least, Nisa Jatha has been someone that I have had the pleasure to work with. The word that comes up for both of us all of the time is trust. It's incredibly difficult work each of us are doing and that we're all doing, but when you find someone where you implicitly trust that they're trying to move the needle and make change in ways that you think are impossible unless you see it, that has been who Nisa has been for Chris and I in our Logic Tree journey and in our lives. Sophia is a new friend, but we're super excited about what she is championing with Giga and what it could mean for youth across the world. So I'm so excited to hear the conversation. Thank you all for being here.
Good job.
I'm so amazed that you could do that at this stage of the week. Yeah. So many things having happened, so little hours of sleep.
Yes. So I get that everyone is very, tired from Climate Week, but I do also want to really echo, you meet a couple founders like Chelsea and Chris, and what I really love about what they're doing is underneath it all, their thesis is this is our gift to the world. Effectively, it's very unselfish. They really are very hungry to move and do something wonderful, and they just love collaborating with the right folks. So I'm so honored that they put this together, being a beacon for us to meet, and I'm just super excited about having this conversation with Sophia, and it's all because of Logic Tree, and I think that what you guys are doing to democratize access, give people choice, and really enable something really fruitful to come from this is just fantastic. So without further ado, I would love for us to kind of jump in, and Sophia, for you to kind of kick us off, or maybe just give us a quick overview on Giga and UNICEF before we dig in.
Super happy to. Well, hi everyone. My name is Sophia Ferraro. I am the head of partnerships for Giga, which is a joint UN initiative focused on expanding internet access to young people, specifically by connecting every school in the world by 2030 is our goal. It's a joint initiative between UNICEF, which is the UN agency for children. Most people have heard of that one, and the littler known UN agency called the International Telecommunications Union. And we were founded in 2019, and to date we've connected almost 6,000 schools and 2 million students. And primarily Giga is really focused on not so much the connecting of the schools itself, but really actually creating the digital products and the tools that are needed to expand connectivity on a global scale. So we actually build tech products. We build an open source database of location and the internet access status of every school in the world. And we really kind of have like a very tech and data focused approach at solving this problem.
Wonderful. And what specifically within what Giga's doing is really driving global access and opportunity for youth?
I mean, I think really just the essence of what it means to have internet access at its core. I think something that I really like to use oftentimes if I'm like the moderator of a panel or just to kind of spark a discussion with people is to think about kind of both the role that internet access plays in your life, but also that first time that you ever really remember engaging with the internet, and what that meant to you, what world that opened up. I think as people who have access at our fingertips, it's so easy to kind of almost turn the narrative towards the negative, right? Oh my goodness, like my phone, I can't step away from my phone, or all these issues that we have. But that's actually such a luxury when you think about it, that I could tell Chelsea I was running 15 minutes late on my way over here, and that's all because I have access, or that I could continue working during the pandemic, and that's because of access. that I can do my daily job with my boss in Geneva because I have access, you know, and so just to think about that on like a very personal level and how much positivity it brings. But I think actually to echo something that I heard earlier, how much choice it brings. You'll think that I am truly making this up, but our little slogan byline is information, opportunity, and choice. So super similar to yours. And we actually think about those kind of as like stepping stones, because the first step is really just having information, right? Like, you know, the information that's out there. The second is opportunity, something that's actually forward moving, something that you can do with that information, whether it's a job, maybe it's just one job. And then choice is really kind of that enabling factor where you have multiple opportunities, where you can make decisions across a multitude of different options. And we really think kind of about the ways that internet access, especially for young people, can bring them up each rung of that ladder.
Yeah, no, fascinating. And I think that as we stand here, you know, finishing Climate Week on the kind of cuffs of UNGA, and you know, we've seen the SDGs being highly politicized. You know, we're off track. There's in multiple of, I can't keep track of the trillions of dollars needed in order to kind of get us back there. And we really see that the global south is a vertical where we need to then concentrate on. And that is not only on mitigation and adaptation, but I also think what you're doing at Giga on democratizing this access and like the unbanking of people by being able to have access. In your view, what do you feel Giga is really catalyzing around for the SDGs and helping us kind of get on track? Sorry, big question. So
No, totally. I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of conversation around, like, you know, the SDGs. Can we say that we achieved them in so little time, with so little time left for the original goals? I think also if you think about them, and we think about this a lot, you'll notice like internet access is not really explicitly referenced in any of the SDGs. Oftentimes we actually, and my boss, Chris Fronda, has written an article about this, that connectivity should be SDG 0, and you know how like the SDGs are like that wheel. Maybe it's the 0 right in the middle, because internet access can actually help us achieve so many, like every single one of those SDGs, through the dissemination of information, through what the internet actually provides. So that's really interesting for us, frankly, as an internet access initiative, to kind of look across those SDGs and see our role in all of them and also none of them. I think the one that we primarily have been speaking to over the course of this week is SDG 9, and truly it's just like infrastructure, and that's not even the only word in that SDG. So it is just really interesting to kind of like think about how something so impactful like internet access can actually not really have a home in the SDGs, which then just begs the question of like, how do we utilize this framework to actually make the impact that the world needs in 2023 as opposed to like 2015 or whatever when they were written.
Yeah, no, fascinating, and I do really like that vertical of it being 0, because if you democratize access, like education, people from lower socioeconomic status suffer from malnutrition, fall through the cracks, have lower salaries, and I think that even financial inclusion with the ability to democratize that, and specifically with Chelsea and Chris are doing at Logic Tree, it's now not just knowledge, it's good knowledge, right? And what we heard from our partner about, you know, just even having access for women to have access in different positions and missing school less. So I do feel it is a vertical that's going to cross poverty, education, and several SDGs very glaringly. But I hear you that, yeah, it's not an actual SDG, but potentially maybe it should be the 0.
Yeah.
And again, just, you know, your career has been fascinating, and, you know, we had this discussion about you know, doing things in international relations and then working in management consulting and now very heavily at the UN. What do you think was one of your hardest decisions you had in your professional life? And how did you navigate that? Because you've clearly had the social impact lens across it. Would just love for us to maybe dig into something like that.
Yeah. I think probably, and I haven't spoken much to what partnerships means within our initiative, but probably something I can kind of reference is as it relates to how we think about partnering with especially the private sector for internet access. So as head of partnerships, I basically work on all of our collaborations with private sector, with government, with foundations, to bring in not only funding, but also the technical resources that we need. So a lot of our partners will provide us with what I like to consider investment, but also with, software development capacity, whether it's a pro bono development team that works with us on an app that we're developing, or unlimited compute time in someone's environment. So it's really interesting to think about the multitude of ways that the private sector, public, and philanthropic sectors can all really support in, helping the work that we're doing. One of the thorniest topics that I, on a regular basis, actually have to kind of evaluate is around the role that the telecommunications industry itself has in our initiative. It is at once one of the most profitable, and I think it's like they've let down a lot of the world in many ways, depending on the circumstances, and yet we really also can't do this without them. And so how to work with such a big industry that is in many ways very entrenched in doing things the way that they're doing, while also knowing that in order to connect every school, we can't do it without them on board. So we do have, one of our partners is Ericsson, a big Swedish telecoms company. And we, on a regular basis, as we kind of work with especially that industry, have to think about how are we pushing them to do better while also carrying them along on this journey. And that kind of push and pull, kind of navigating those two objectives and making sure that we're working together while also holding them to a higher standard is something that has been particularly challenging, I think, in my current role.
I guess also you're in an audience with the likes of really fascinating people. I guess what would be your ask, what would you really want to envision Giga to be? Collaboration, partnerships, and having your mission out there, and kind of, things that you are struggling with, and also where, it's all about collaboration in SDG 17, where we could support your work in the industry more holistically.
Yeah. I think the answer to that question often really depends on what resources someone has at their disposal or is able to offer. But I often kind of highlight three things. I think speaking to the telecoms industry in general, in case any of you are out there and hopefully you weren't offended by what I just said, I think really what I ask of them is speed. 1/3 of the world is still not connected to the internet, which is kind of appalling when you think about that. And I think the longer that digital divide exists, the harder it's going to be to close. The economic repercussions of not having access are just going to exacerbate the problem and are going to make this investment decision for them that much harder to extend internet access. So I think speaking to that industry, I say we really need to work with speed and to think about how we can do this faster. I think to a bit of a broader but more technical subset of partners, oftentimes I really point to the value of open data. It's one of the core tenets of the work that we do is really open sourcing a lot of the data that we receive from our partners, that we gather ourselves. For example, I think I referenced it earlier, but one of our core products is a map of schools. And when I say that to people, they're like, I don't understand why that would be helpful. What do you mean you're mapping schools? And when I say that, I literally mean that we will go to, say, a Ministry of Education in a certain country and say, hey, where are the schools? We need to know if they're connected to the internet, but first we need to know where they are. And they'll say, yeah, so, we have this Excel spreadsheet, and there are maybe, we think there are 20,000 schools. You know, we have like the headmaster's name and phone number, but we don't really know where they are and if they have access to the internet. And it's a fascinating problem for infrastructure to solve for internet access when you don't know where the schools are. So one of the core tech products that our team does is actually just, they'll take training data on school locations and they'll train machine learning models to identify what a school looks like based on satellite imagery. And they'll fill pretty huge gaps in the Ministry of Education's like data sets on where schools are, especially in remote areas. So for example, in Colombia, I think we found 2,000 schools that weren't even on the Ministry of Education's registry that we kind of confirmed. We were like, actually, these are schools. Like, we know that you know that it didn't exist. So I think I say that long-winded anecdote really just to say, like, open data is so valuable, and I think it's one of the best examples of ways that we can all kind of collaborate together and actually make these challenges more actionable and actually find solutions against them. And then I think the third is like probably the one I have the least to say on, but it's financing. That's part of my role as partnerships. You know, we fundraise not just for ourselves, but also for UNICEF's country offices that do a lot of the implementing work around the world. So yeah, I would say that: speed, open data, financing.
Wonderful. And then I would love to also, like, what would be like a case study that you're really excited about that you worked on or that's integrated within Giga? Because it's so fascinating. Like, how are you finding and mapping these schools? What does that network? Is it because of the network within UNICEF? And then, you know, is there something you could just take us through as a story? Because I think it would be really valuable to just see how theory works in practice. Because on the other side, we read these great, you know, articles, but like, how is it in the weeds on what they're working on?
Yeah. I think a really good example, and one that's actually quite close to my role and the work that I've done. So I've been working with Giga for 3.5 years, about since it started, and I haven't always been in the partnerships role. And initially I was actually working in like the business and operations for mapping and figuring out how we were going to get from having mapped at that point like maybe 100,000 schools to, I think today we've mapped it's over 2 million, I want to say. But this example is also quite relevant based on what's happening there now, but we were working with the government of Niger and our country, the UNICEF country office in Niger. And they had a similar situation where they basically said, you know, the World Bank had come in at some point and done like a survey of the education system. They knew where 3,000 schools were, but they did not know where the rest of them were, and they had no idea if they had access to the internet. So our team did the machine learning modeling that I mentioned earlier, but the other part of how we can figure out how to connect schools to the internet is we need to know if they have internet access to begin with. And so we worked very closely just with our country office to develop like truly the scrappiest, it's not even an application, it was like a web page that they developed that was basically like, we basically just said, can you just send this to all the headmasters, praying that they had mobile coverage even, so that they could open this on their phone. And it was a URL that basically would automatically like geolocate where they were and just ask them, do you have electricity? Do you have internet access? What is your school code? Or like, what is your school name? Something that we can identify based on, to essentially populate this database that didn't exist. And that is now actually, I mean, it is really hard to kind of watch what's happening there with the government shifts, because we don't really know like even where a lot of these plans are going and what's happening to them. But that actually was used by I want to say he's the Minister of ICT. He's technically like the president or the CEO. You might actually know like the specific structure of this, but it's like a very unique thing that they have in Niger. And he not only used that for helping to connect schools, but he started to use that database as the foundation for pitching to the World Bank on I think it's a $100 million half loan, half grant to do smart cities. So using schools as hubs for connectivity so that the community around it can actually be connected as well. And it was kind of this amazing example of like how even sometimes the simplest tech solution can actually achieve so much in a context of having, you know, very little information about the scope and the size of the challenge in front of you. It's also something I was like very intimately involved with, and yeah, I think, you know, there's like that positive side of it that we achieve so much. Recently there's more of a negative side that we're not really sure what's going to happen with that. But I think that that's also speaks to kind of the circumstances that UNICEF works in. I mean, Giga, UNICEF is in 131 countries. Giga, the initiative I work on, we are approaching 30 countries. And so, you know, at any given time, we're working in a lot of different contexts trying to advance this. So yeah.
So talk about grassroots partnerships and moving the needle. I mean, that's, you know, also having operated in emerging markets and working with development finance institutions, you do see that you do need your local partners, because a lot of the times you can't fill a form, and who's the person on the ground who's gonna tell you that truth? And it's like, those surveys matter because they literally tell you indigenous knowledge, what's happening and how you're going to integrate that. I think it's fascinating. I will close it off to see if there's any questions anyone in the room wanted to ask, and then I have actually a final question for our host, so stay tuned. Anyone, yeah, please.
I just was curious, you didn't mention the Gates Foundation as one of your funders. Is there a reason for that?
They're just not one of our funders. I mean,
they had a
wouldn't say no.
huge program to connect up schools to the internet.
Yeah,
So it seems to me that that would be like a natural
yeah,
funder.
yeah, definitely a possibility. I'm sure UNICEF has a relationship with them, but yeah, we haven't had one so far.
Do you want one?
Know somebody?
Yeah.
Walked by him at Climate Week.
Yeah.
Any help with AI, helping you map the schools? Drones enabled with AI?
Yeah, there definitely are AI elements to the mapping that I was just mentioning. So for example, our data science lead is currently working with a team to, they're basically using open data sets of light, like where there's light in the middle of the night, to figure out electric grid maps when we don't have them ourselves. So it's kind of like one of those things that we need to know to plan the infrastructure and like even build the cost estimate of how much it's going to cost to connect all these schools, to know if they're on the grid or if they're going to need a generator or things like that. So that's just one example of ways that the team is using AI. They're always looking for, I think that's also like the most academic research. I like to call them the nerds very lovingly. They're like such a cool part of our team. And they often do a lot of external collaborations with different organizations.
And just a quick follow, it's public schools that you're mapping, right? Not even these, because there's a huge emergence of like low fee, high quality private schools.
We do all primary and secondary schools.
Great.
And oftentimes, so like I was in Belize earlier this year, very small country, not that many schools. But public schools really only are like, I want to say it was like a quarter of the schools that they have. Private would be considered, they're mostly like run by a religious organization and they receive some public funding. But yeah, in a lot of cases, schools that are even serving like refugee populations from Guatemala in that circumstance are private.
You can go first.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I just had a question about resistance to what it is that you all are doing. I personally think it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I know that certain, let's say governments, they need isolation in order to maintain a certain level of control. So you would be minimizing isolation by giving access to the world to the schools. So I'm wondering if there are any communities that wouldn't like that are in resistance to that level of innovation.
Do you mean like authoritarian governments, or you mean more like indigenous communities?
I think maybe, or like schools tied to maybe terrorist organizations, things like that.
All sorts of factors, and then all sorts of factors, but I'm assuming that there's, just like with any kind of innovation, there's always someone that has a resistance to it for whatever reasons there may be. And giving people access to information is something that a lot of people, I think there's a reason why the internet hasn't spread all over the world yet, is because of that to some degree. So I was wondering if you've encountered any resistance, and if so, how do you overcome that resistance?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's actually, there are a lot of points of resistance that I've seen and that I often am asked about, and that's actually not what, I don't have a anecdote top of mind actually. Yeah, no, I don't think that we've seen that. Granted, you know, we do only work in countries where the UNICEF country office has like inroads with the government. And it is, like I said, I joined Giga and UNICEF 3.5 years ago, and it's been super fascinating for me to learn this, that especially in the context of things that are happening in like Niger or Brazil or Colombia, two countries that we've worked in that have recently had like regime changes, that the country office, UNICEF country offices they are kind of like, UNICEF is an organization that's kind of turned on its head, where rather than being top down, the country offices are the heart, like the beating heart and blood system of everything that we do. And they really hold this role of like constant provider of services, advisors to the government, regardless of who the government is. And so I think that maybe part of the reason we haven't really encountered that is that we always will take a UNICEF country office's steer on like what is going to be interesting to that government. We don't really work against the government. I think, I'm trying to think, like, we're not currently working with Afghanistan, I guess is like a good example. But I have also heard, I was recently with a colleague who she has like a crazy story. She was in Sudan, Yemen, Afghanistan, and then Belize, and she said, this is my karma posting, that finally I'm just like in a nice place with beaches. But she was talking about providing services in Afghanistan, and you know, they would be in areas where the Taliban was there and permitting them to be there because they were providing services to young people, and they knew that that was beneficial for their community. But yeah, I think if we were probably trying to offer internet, they wouldn't be so keen on that.
Yeah, but Joe, I would add too, so one of the models, and I've seen a lot of next gen models, but one of the ones that I've always really admired was Casey Rotter developed a next gen model within UNICEF. So one of the things that those next gens will do is, yes, they fundraise, right? And I think we missed, Alina's here with the Queen's Commonwealth Trust, and we're excited to partner with them. And also look at some next gen models in this coming year, and glad that she made it here tonight. But with UNICEF's and Casey's vision, a lot of times they would be this ambassador, right? So they're going ahead of the storm of some of the things that might be resistance on the ground, and a lot of them are from the actual areas that they're a part of, and they can navigate some of those things so that when Giga comes in under, you know, that country leadership, there's groundwork that's been laid ahead of it that helps them move at the speed that they need to.
Awesome. Thank you.
I will say, I think probably of the like more interesting anecdotes and like resistances that I hear, one is like security issues related to where schools are and whether making that public is perhaps jeopardizing children. There's definitely like a tech solution to that. Like you just snap it to a 5-kilometer grid to anonymize where the actual school is while still visualizing it. But also we've seen situations where vulnerable communities have said, no, actually put that on a map. we want there to be that accountability and transparency so that when that school isn't there in a week, we can say that like a school was just destroyed. So there have been some really powerful stories around that. And then I think when it comes to government resistance, oftentimes there is a bit of resistance from a certain set of governments around putting that information online because they are worried what it looks like if we expose that a bunch of schools in our country are not connected to the internet. So like usually these are kind of the like leading global south countries like a Rwanda or an India or a Brazil. They really want to like present themselves in a certain way. Kenya is also up there, and they don't really love when we highlight like, yeah, almost every school is connected in Nairobi, but like, how about when you go 4 hours outside? Like, not really. And they don't always want that to be public information.
Thank you.
I just have a question. When you do the mapping, what type of mapping are you using? Like, are you using ArcGIS or how, like, can the public see what you're mapping? So going back to like, when you do have resistance, which maybe you don't want that publicly to be shown, but even fundraising and the story you just showed to us, I feel like, you know, we're all gonna remember what you just said.
Yeah.
So is there a way for you to kind of put the success stories on the map to show how the schools have been impacted and the change that you guys have seen?
Yeah, I guess to unpack a couple, because there's like the tech solution that we use for the mapping, and then maybe the stories are kind of two separate things. All of everything we do is open source, so you can actually like go to our GitHub and like you can leverage that software for something else. In fact, we're currently working with the Africa CDC that has an interest in leveraging what we've built, but for mapping health centers. So like we're like, you know what, we're only schools, we're not health centers, but we will happily like give you all of this to empower you to create something similar. Because whether or not health centers have internet access is also super relevant to them. ArcGIS, I think, is proprietary, and generally we don't use proprietary technologies if we can avoid it. On storytelling, it is always a really hard thing, and I know my comms team is always working like around the clock trying to gather stories. We have some amazing ones. We have a very active LinkedIn page, Twitter, X, whatever it is, with some like really amazing videos sometimes of, for example, I think it was in Kazakhstan, and there's this video of these guys basically trying to carry internet equipment like over these precarious like rivers, and one of them like falls in, and they're trying to like haul it all the way up because there are these really, really remote like towns that they can't even get there via roads, just trying to install the internet infrastructure for them. So there are really amazing stories that we capture. It's not embedded within the map. That would be an interesting idea. And we have also explored some other, I won't get into it, but like some other ways of actually creating another layer of life behind each dot, actually in the form of an NFT that can kind of like be a way to pull in funding for a particular school's ongoing internet access. But if anyone wants to see the map, it's projectconnect.world. If you just go there. I also have my business cards with me, and they actually have like a little map on the back of Brazil that you can see. Yeah. And our website is giga.global.
I think if it's user generated, that can, avoid maybe the problems of, like a terrorist organization having a school or finding out that there's 200 schools in Brazil, in Colombia, and we don't know about, like, what were those being used for, right? Like, was it just in remote locations, or they've been used for some kind of like terrorist training? So that's like the scary part, I think, but I think if you have some kind of like user-generated ability and you provide the internet to those remote places, maybe people can like speak out somehow. But they need access to phones and things like that, so.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being so candid about that, because it's that other side we don't see, like, do you publish, but then you're working with children, like, who can steal that data? It's obviously highly politicized, but I think also my experience, I notice with the global south or emerging markets, you have this notion, I'm sure you know about it in Kenya, you know, the M-Pesa model. They went from no phones to mobile banking, right? And so if you're thinking about someone who now is being banked, has access to financial inclusion, is, you know, I have one of my mentors who basically mentioned that he was working on refugee crisis, and there was a country he was in, there was a child who kept sending them pictures, and he's like, you could get your whole family out of the refugee camp if you just sold a couple of these pictures to Al Jazeera. And he didn't have a bank account, he couldn't transact inside, and the average, I mean, I won't misquote anyone, and the lifespan of being in a refugee camp. So can you imagine being able to buy yourself out of war, being able to transact online, alongside being able to educate yourself? So I really value what you're doing at Giga on kind of the zero SDG, and it's just very, very insightful and also emotive to me, because it is, you are literally changing the story for so many people. I will close and also hand it over to our host if you want to just close out and say a few words, but I wanted to also ask you both the same question. What do you feel has been your biggest kind of celebration around what you're doing for ethical AI and the SDGs, and then the ask from the room on how we can support you guys? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I think, and I won't speak for Chris, but I will share, just for both of us, I think our biggest celebration and moments are moments like these, when we get to look around and see what the amazing people we have in our lives are doing, and if we can power them from a technology standpoint, if we can capture, and I will answer your question, boy have we had a lot of resistance. What we're trying to do with Logic.wiki and this decision engine is expected, but we're trying to give everyone in the world the ability to have an expert in their pocket. We're trying to change the fact that if you don't have the capital to hire an attorney, you can pursue your venture. If you don't, have the education or the resources or a parent that knows coding, but you're meant to code in the world, that you can do that. And so I think one of my favorite things is building, I quite mean literally, this army of amazing humans that are trying to champion a better world alongside us. And I'm really grateful to Chris and for what he's built. He's somebody that just sees things ahead of the world, and so now it's our job to make that a reality.
Thank you so much.
Well, I'll share a little bit that, so Chelsea was, what was it you were speaking at that you talked about access with, what was the?
Yeah, so I was at a brunch. It was a KFG launch event. So some of you all know I have a foundation that's focused on helping youth figure out what to do if they've inherited or wealth created or want to give capital towards social good. And so we had this brunch, and one of our mentors, who we actually didn't know, we both know, but is S.J. Murray.
Oh, she's wonderful.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's a Nexus member. You either love her or hate her, but that's for a good reason. I was sitting on this panel and we were talking about the power of mentorship. And so years ahead of meeting Chris and what he's built from a technology standpoint, I said, imagine if you could live your life where everyone had at least one mentor. Every kid, every person, every adult across the world, you had one champion in your life. How different would your life be? So grateful to SJ for being one of mine. But.
Yeah, and just, having that access, right? When you have access to amazing people, or last night we were in this incredible room with all of these people that were Harvard, doctors and in finance and everything. And I was talking to someone who was just formerly working with the CDC, and about how their kids would grow up with, you know, the education that most have, but then they would also have this extra level of education that they get access to, whether that's through parents that are doctors, lawyers, whatever it might be. And how do we somehow provide more of this access to every kid, right? So that, and we talked kind of specifically about how it's very difficult for the next generation when they haven't seen the amount of like understanding the depths of epidemiology, right, and looking at things like you know, what's happened with COVID, and understanding how much has gone into really understanding the science behind that is very difficult and challenging for the next generation. But it's a bit easier for the kids that grow up within a household that they have access to seeing that depth, and they have a bit more of an appreciation behind it. So I think that's at least what, you know, what Chelsea was speaking about, is if we can provide just that next level of access to understanding how complex some of these, you know, the developments that we've made in education, knowledge and information and expertise in a more globally accessible way. That's what we want to see in the world.
So we started a bit late, which means unfortunately we don't have a whole lot of time, and hope you guys stay in touch. But each and every one of you is doing incredible things, and if you're here, you're a part of our Logic Tree family, and we hope to see you at World Logic Day, which happens in our home of Austin, and we bring in a lot of our UNM partners for that, which we're excited about. Huge thank you to people like Nisa and Sophia for sharing their stories, their expertise, their knowledge. It matters. So does all of yours. I think they kick us out in like 10 minutes, but I did my best to share. I know that I left out one, and that's Alex with Protecting Leaders of America. He's working under a friend of Nisa and mine, Dominique, to make sure that there are political leaders fighting for sustainability and better things in the US specifically. So don't want to leave Alex out. If I left anybody out, please let me know. But also meet each other. This is just a starting point. We brought you all together for a reason. We believe in you all and what you're going to do, and can't wait to help support each and every one of you. So thank you.